we have been discussing about the Middle Greek philosophers, and here we have been talking about Plato's epistemology vis-a-vis the dialogue of sophist. We would be taking it further in this today's discussion. This is Dr. Ananya Barua, Associate Professor in the Department of Philosophy, Hindu College. Now, the sophist's craft, if we remember from our last discussion, we have been discussing how the sophist's craft involves persuasive speech and appearance without the grounds of knowledge. Epistemologically, he exploits the gap between belief and knowledge, between persuasive opinion and true logos. When we talk about epistemological themes and claims, we see reality and epistemic reference, being versus non-being. Plato's ontological premise, there is a domain of being, the real, including forms and particulars, and a multiplicity of ways things are. Knowledge aims to track or grasp this reality. Key epistemic move, non-being is reinterpreted as difference or otherness rather than absolute nothing. This is a crucial pivot. It lets Plato explain how false beliefs or false propositions can refer to real things. They attribute the wrong property or place the thing in the wrong category. Epistemic consequence, truth is the correctness of a proposition's predication relative to the real categorical standing of things. Error is an incorrect predication, cognitive misclassification. Going ahead, the falsehood and the possibility of error, the problem solved part. The stranger explains falsehood as asserting that X is F when X is G, where G is not equivalent to F. This false sentence refers to a thing but attributes the wrong property. So, falsehood is not talking of nothing but misascribing being. Epistemic import, we can have beliefs about things that are about real entities but are mistaken in their ascriptions. Thus, error is epistemically intelligible. It is not mysterious that we are mismapping between the mind, language, and reality is the core problem. Language, reference, and prediction. The act of saying Socrates is wise attributes a predicate to a subject. For Plato, correct predication requires aligning the predicate with the subject's real form definition. Reference to non-being, Plato's relational non-being allows sentences to be about what is not in the sense that they deny a predicate, thereby referring to the difference between the subject and the predicate. Epistemic upshot, language is meaningful even when it is false. Sentences can misrepresent reality without being meaningless. This is crucial for epistemology and semantics. It allows for meaningful error and false belief. Knowledge versus opinion doxa. Plato continues his ladder. Knowledge, episteme, involves grasping the forms and true definitions. Opinion or doxa is more fluid, bound to appearance and often shaped by rhetoric. Sophists exploit doxa. They produce persuasive beliefs that lack grounding in forms or definitions. Thus, epistemic virtue aligned with knowledge resists sophistic manipulation. Methodological point, the method of division is used to secure knowledge by precise definition. The sophist's craft avoids such rigor. The method of dialectic as epistemic technology, division and collection attempt to dissect concepts into their essential parts so cognition can latch onto the real kinds. Dialectic aims to move beyond mere appearance to genuine understanding by identifying the right universals or kinds. Plato's epistemic theory is thus partly methodological. Proper procedures, analysis, divisions, dialectic are required for knowledge. Images, imitations and epistemic trust, images versus reality. Art and rhetorical images can generate beliefs that seem true but are only mimetic. The sophist trades in such representations. Epistemic vulnerability. Humans are susceptible to persuasive images. Sound epistemology must distinguish between what appears to be and what is. Critical implication. Epistemic responsibility requires training in discernment, the ability to see when speech or image is mere appearance. How the sophist contributes to core epistemological issues. Explaining false belief without nihilism. Plato resolves the paradox of falsehood. How can we talk about non-being? By reframing non-being as difference. This gives a coherent account of false belief. Beliefs can concern real things yet be belief false because of incorrect attribution. That is an epistemic foundation for treating error as understandable, testable and remediable. Connecting ontology to epistemology. Knowledge is not independent of what there is. To know is to correctly map mind language into the ontological structure of reality. This prefigures modern concerns about truth makers and ontological commitment. What must exist for our statements to be true? Language and meaning. Plato's treatment anticipates problems in the philosophy of language. How do words attach to objects and properties? How can we meaningfully deny? These are pre-analytic versions of later issues in reference theory, prediction and semantics. Now we come to the method and definition. The success or failure of epistemic inquiry depends on method. Dialectic and division are cognitive technologies aimed at producing secure beliefs. This links epistemology to logic and methodology. Sophistry as epistemic malpractice. Plato treats sophistry as a pro-epistemic malpractice, producing beliefs without proper grounds, exploiting rhetoric, and fostering instability. This is a moralized epistemology. Good knowledge is both cognitively and ethically preferable to mere persuasion. Later reception, modern parallels and philosophical resonance. We see the historical consequences. Aristotle reacts to Plato's ontology and theory of predication. Sophists' concerns inform his categories and treatment of predication and falsity. Neoplatonists or the medievals wrestled with the ontology-epistemology link and with how language can refer to universals and non-existence. Now, if we see the modern parallels and influence, we see the philosophy of language from Frege to Russell. Plato's puzzle about falsehood and non-being anticipates problems of reference and denial. Russell's theory of descriptions and Frege's distinction between sense reference respond to similar puzzles about how to talk meaningfully about non-existent or false entities. The truth maker theory. Plato's insistence that truth and falsehood depends on relations between statements and the way the world is resonating with truth maker views. Truths must be grounded in reality. Epistemology of error or misrepresentation. The distinction between belief and knowledge and the account of error as misascription prefigures contemporary accounts of illusion, hallucination, and misrepresentation in cognitive science and analytic epistemology. Rhetoric versus epistemic virtue. Plato's critique of sophistry resonates with modern worries about misinformation, propaganda, and epistemic responsibility. Sophists as manipulators of opinion rather than seekers of truth. Now, if we note the critical reflections and issues and see the strength of the dialogue sophist, we see that sophist gives a sophisticated account of falsehood that saves meaningful discourse about non-being, a major philosophical achievement. It tightly links method to epistemic success. Clear definitions and dialectic lead to knowledge. The dialogue anticipates many later analytic problems about reference and predication. If we are to talk about the difficulties or the contested points, we see the ontological commitments. Plato's forms and the privileged status of kinds may appear metaphysically heavy. Modern philosophers may prefer nominalist or naturalist alternatives. Ambiguity of non-being. Although otherness solves a lot, some critics think Plato's treatment leaves unanswered how degrees of non-being or complex negations function. Method of division's limits. Diaresis can be powerful, but it is not always clear how to apply it systematically in messy, overlapping real-world categories, a problem later critics pointed out. Sophist as caricature. Some read Plato as too quick to moralize sophistry, conflating the legitimate rhetorical skill with deceit, a perennial debate in reading Plato. Now, if we look at the practical takeaway, we see that sophist is essential reading if one cares about how error is possible and intelligible, how language can meaningfully deny or misrepresent, the relation between what exists and what we can know, the methodological preconditions of secure knowledge, definition, division, dialectic, and the ethical dimension of inquiry, sophistry versus truth seeking. Now, we will be delving into the realm of what is then epistemology for Plato. Epistemology is the study of knowledge, as we have seen in both the two dialogues discussed today and previously, the dialogue of Meno and the dialogue of Sophist. It is its nature, sources, limits, and relation to truth and belief. For Plato, to know something is not merely to have an opinion or perception about it. It is to grasp its unchanging essence, its form. So Plato's epistemology is inseparable from his metaphysics. We can know only what is fully real, and that is the realm of forms or ideas. Now, if we look at the PPT being displayed here, we see the central distinction of knowledge or episteme versus doxa, aspect, episteme, and doxa. Now, the aspect of object, episteme, the forms is unchanging realities, the opinion or belief is the sensible world changing appearances. About nature, knowledge is stable, certain, rational. Opinion or belief is variable, uncertain, perceptual. Similarly, the source of knowledge or episteme is reason or dialectic. In opinion or belief or doxa, it is sense, perception, imagination. Again, remember we are discussing the central distinction here between episteme and doxa, and example for here for episteme is knowing what justice itself is. Doxa would be believing a particular act is just. Value here for episteme is true, objective, eternal, and for doxa it is the mix of truth and falsity and subjective. So true knowledge must be about what truly is, the unchanging. What belief is about, what comes to be and passes away is the changing. This is the foundation of Plato's epistemology, that being and knowability coincide. But we must also understand here that Plato's philosophy have had a huge impact on a lot of philosophers. One of the early Greek philosophers who have had an impact of Plato has definitely been Parmenides. If we talk about true knowledge, Parmenides' being stands tall on this account. Being for Parmenides is that unchangeable apeiron which is beyond any changes. Changes that we may see comes and goes, changes that we see are superficial, but the core or the swabhava or the essence remains the same. So on the one hand, if we talk about the Parmenidean being as the unchanging form, on the other hand, we see Heraclitus's becoming as the other extreme. Becoming is the changing, what comes to be and passes away. And interestingly, both Parmenides and Heraclitus are taken as antithesis to the other. However, as I see them, they are in continuity. Had Heraclitus not been there, Parmenides too would not have come up with something which is as stable, as unchanging as being. There also have been a lot of philosophers, a lot of critiques who think that the Parmenidean form or the Parmenidean unchanging being is nothing but a well explicit version of Plato's theory of forms. There are of course reservations there, but many critics try to see a connect between Parmenidean form and Plato's theory of forms as the unchanging. Similarly, with Heraclitus's theory of becoming, there are some philosophers who connect the Heraclitean theory of change with our Indian philosophy's Buddhism, which is the Pratitya Samutpada or the theory of dependent origination theory. Yes, there can be similarity, there can be points of intersections between philosophies or across culture, across globe, but one must understand that there will also be points of tensions. Instead of hooting for one over the other, the best way to study philosophy is to take the both seemingly extremes as a continuity of the other. Now this is the very foundation of Plato's epistemology, that being and knowability must and should coincide. Also, in line to what we have been discussing, there are also other dialogues besides Meno, besides sophists, and some of which are very crucial when we are studying Plato's epistemology. The two realms of the allegory of the cave and the divided line from Republic chapter 6 to 8 is yet another example. Plato uses these two famous metaphors to explain how knowledge relates to reality. In the allegory of the cave, as we understand, the prisoners see only shadows on the wall, images of real things. When one escapes, he sees first objects, then the sun, which is the symbol of the form of the good. This ascent represents the journey from illusion to knowledge, from doxa to episteme. Again, in the PPT as being shared here, if we talk about the divided line, we see that Plato divides reality and cognition into 4 levels, which is, of course, the concept or the section, the realm, the cognitive power, and example. Under the section of imagination, which in Greek is called as eikasia, the realm is shadows or images. Cognitive power is the lowest or illusion, and example is, for example, seeing a reflection. The pistis is the belief, where physical things manifest. Cognitive power is the empirical earth. An example is trusting the senses. Similarly, there is Dionia, which is thinking, and the realm is mathematical objects. The cognitive power is discursive reason, and the example can be geometry. Last but not the least is noesis, which is understanding. The realm is forms, which is the good, and the cognitive power is pure intuition, which is dialectic, and the example is, for example, understanding justice itself. So we see that the method of dialectic, which is the way to know knowledge, is yet another significant epistemological tool for Plato. For Plato, knowledge is achieved through dialectic, rational dialogue and reasoning that ascends from the visible to the intelligible. Dialectic moves from particular instances to universal principles. It tests definitions, dissolves contradictions, and leads to a recollection of truth. In late dialogues such as Sophist or Statesman, Plato develops the method of division and collection, a logical technique for defining things precisely by locating them within hierarchies of kinds. The epistemic goal is to attain a definition that corresponds to the true form, a cognitive act of grasping being itself. Similarly, in Theaetetus, discussion is about what is knowledge. In Theaetetus, Plato examines 3 different definitions of knowledge. Knowledge is perception, which is rejected since perception varies and can be false. Again, knowledge is true belief, which is not enough. One may believe to truth accidentally. We also have knowledge, which is true belief plus logos, which is account or reason closest to knowledge. This last formula anticipates the later JTB and twists of theory of knowledge, though Plato himself leaves it open-ended. Epistemological contribution, we see that knowledge requires truth and rational justification, not just subjective belief. In the Sophist, as we have discussed, it is all about knowledge, falsehood, and non-being. In Sophist, Plato explains how false belief and errors are possible. Non-being is not absolute nothing but different from what is. Hence, falsehood is equivalent to saying of something what it is not. This allows Plato to explain mistaken beliefs and the difference between appearance and reality. Epistemologically, this defines truth and falsity as relations between mind and reality, a precursor to later correspondence theories of truth. Further, the ultimate source of knowledge, the form of good, we see that at the top of Plato's epistemology stands the form of the good as described in the Republic. It is the source of all reality and intelligibility. Just as the sun illuminates visible objects, the good illuminates intelligible ones. To know truly is to see in the light of the good. Thus, Plato's epistemology culminates in a mystical, rational vision. Knowledge as illumination by the ultimate principle of truth and being. If we reflect on the summary here, the PPT being displayed, we see that the concept of knowledge versus opinion is seen in the Dialogue Republic. The key idea is about forms versus sensibles. The epistemological insight is knowledge is of what is, opinion of what it becomes. Similarly, the concept of recollection is oozing out from the dialogues Meno and Phaedo. The key idea is learning is equivalent to remembering. The epistemological insight is knowledge is innate and rational. The divided line, the dialogue, comes out from again Republic chapter 7 or book 7. The key idea is the 4 levels of cognition, and the epistemological insight is the hierarchy from illusion to understanding. Further, we see that the concept of dialectic can be definitely studied and researched in books such as the Republic and Sophist. The key idea here is a reasoned assent to the good. The epistemological insight is the method of grasping the forms. And then if one is interested in the concept of true belief plus logos, we see that, or we will find that in the dialogue Theaetetus. Here, the key idea is all about the definition of knowledge, and the epistemological insight has been the prototype of JTB. In fact, everyone who has been a philosophical researcher and is currently working in the field of epistemology, it is but given that they should go through Plato's work, the Theaetetus. And last but not the least, falsehood and non-being, this very interesting concept. If one has to discuss, it is in the dialogue of Sophist, and the key idea is the difference allows falsity, and the epistemological insight is of course ground for truth and error distinction. So as discussed, there are various themes and key themes under epistemology which are displayed in the various dialogues of Plato. But the most interesting and the important ones are definitely the Republic, the Meno, the Phaedo, and Republic. When I am saying it is definitely chapter 6 onwards, the Theaetetus and the Sophists. So these few dialogues of Plato encompasses what we call as Plato's epistemology, and rightly so, as Plato says that to know truly is to see the light of the good, and so for him the concept of the good was the highest form, and Plato's epistemology in a very philosophical way culminates in a mystical rational vision, not just mystical, not just rational, but a combination of both. And knowledge thus is an illumination by the ultimate principle of truth and being. So this was the discussion about Plato's epistemology. We will be discussing more of our Middle Greek philosophers in our next discussions. Thank you so much.